The first snowstorm of the winter moved across the plains like a wounded animal, low and growling, dragging its white breath over the earth. Solon Whitlock pushed through it with the last scraps of strength she had left. Her boots were worn thin, her coat too light, and every exhale felt like a confession to the cold. She didn't look back. She feared that if she did, she might see the shadow she had been running from. Man, she did not have enough hope left in her body to survive the sight of it. Ah! Distant lantern flickered once through the white haze, then disappeared, then flickered again, as if deciding whether she deserved to see it. She staggered toward it, half dreaming, half praying, until the outline of a barn rose from the storm like a memory of shelter. Her hands shook so hard that she struggled to lift the wooden latch. But the storm, perhaps merciful for once, blew the door inward for her. Warmth didn't greet her barns in the wild. West seldom offered such luxuries, but the absence of wind felt like a blessing. Horses turned their heads as she slipped inside, their breaths visible in soft, slow puffs. She sank into a cradle of straw near the back wall and curled into herself, trying to bury both her trembling and her past. She knew she had only bought herself minutes, not safety. But sometimes minutes were enough to keep a soul alive. Her eyes fluttered closed. The smell of hay wrapped around her like a thin blanket, and the wood's old creaks played something like a lullaby. She let her bones settle, telling herself she would rest just until the storm's roar softened. Shame pricked at her in the dark shame that she had run. Shame that she had no place to belong. Shame that she had trusted the wrong people and was paying for it with her freedom. But she swallowed that feeling the way a starving person swallows cold air, because there was nothing else left to hold. Then the barn door opened again. She sat upright instantly, her breath cutting short. A figure filled the doorway completely, his silhouette too large to be anyone but trouble. The lantern he carried cast a sphere of gold around him, but not enough to reveal the expression behind his beard and shadowed eyes. Snow clung to his coat like dusted flour. He stepped inside, and the door thudded shut behind him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The man simply stood, letting the storm's muffled howl settle around them. His presence did not feel rushed, nor predatory. It felt deliberate, steady, as if he were trying not to startle a frightened animal. Finally, he crouched down to her level. Despite his size, the motion was patient, almost humble. He set the lantern on the straw beside him, letting its warm halo catch her face. She tried to shrink back anyway. "You look half frozen," he murmured, his voice a low rumble softened by concern. "And half starved." She didn't answer. Answers had cost her too much lately. The man reached into his coat slowly and drew out a wool blanket. Without touching her, he draped it over her shoulders, guiding it into place with the gentleness of someone who had tended to fragile things before wounded horses, maybe, or his own wounds. She clutched the fabric and lowered her head, embarrassed by how quickly the warmth brought tears to her eyes. "My name's Cade Mercer," he said. "Folks around here call me Redstone. You don't have to tell me yours unless you want to." His name rolled through her memory with faint recognition. She had heard it once in the whispers of passing travelers, a giant-hearted cowboy who mostly kept to himself. A man who worked hard, spoke little, and carried a loneliness he didn't bother to hide. She pulled the blanket closer. "I won't stay long," she whispered. "I just needed a place to disappear for a moment." Cade didn't argue. He simply nodded, as if he understood exactly what kind of person needed a place to disappear. As if he recognized the quiet panic behind her voice. "You can rest a bit," he said. "Storms mean tonight won't do you any favors out there." The barn groaned under a heavy gust of wind. Selene flinched. Cade noticed he noticed everything, it seemed, but didn't pretend her fear was smaller than it was. Instead, he stood again and held out a hand without insisting she'd take it. "Come inside the house," he said softly. "Not safe for anyone freezing in a barn." She stared at his hand. The roughness of his knuckles, the size of his palm, the steadiness in the way he kept it still, none of it threatened her. All of it scared her anyway. Trust was a luxury she didn't believe she deserved, and yet she reached for him. His hand enveloped hers, not with force, but with warmth, guiding her gently toward the house. The snow had thickened in the minutes she'd been inside. Flakes spun like ash, like feathers, like memories trying to find a place to land. Cade shielded her with his body as they crossed the yard, and she noticed he walked just slightly slower than a man his size naturally would, matching her pace. Letting her exhaustion set the rhythm. Inside, the house glowed with a soft orange light. The scent of cedar smoke clung to every surface. He set her near the fire, poured hot water into a tin cup, and placed it into her hands as if it were a fragile wish. She sipped it slowly, letting the heat bloom through her throat. "Who's after you?" he asked gently. Her fingers tightened around the cup. "I can't say. If I say it out loud, it becomes too real again." Cade accepted that answer with another small nod. He didn't dig deeper. He only sat across from her, elbows braced on his knees, watching the fire instead of watching her, giving her space to breathe, to exist, to not defend herself. Outside, faint voices drifted through the storm, the distant rise and fall of men calling out to each other. Searching, Cade's eyes flickered toward the window, and something in his posture changed. He stood, moved to the door, listened carefully. "They cumin this way," she whispered, panic swelling in her chest. "Maybe," he said. But the word held no fear, only resolve. The knock came a moment later, sharp, authoritative, familiar in the way that bad memories were familiar. Selene nearly dropped her cup. Cade opened the door, his body filling the frame like a wall. Marshal Brigg Tully stood outside, coat dusted with frost, eyes narrow with suspicion and self-importance. "Evenin' Mercer," Tully said. "We're looking for a runaway girl. Heard someone saw a lantern burn in late in your barn?" Cade didn't look back at Selene. He didn't shift his stance. He simply spoke with the steady rumble that seemed carved out of the mountains. "Ain't no runaway here." Tully leaned to the side, trying to peer past him. "Mind if I take a look?" Just trying to keep the peace. Cade didn't move an inch. "You a skin?" he said calmly, "or demandin'?" The marshal's jaw tightened. "If someone's hiding here, I need to know." Cade inhaled once, slow, and then the light, gentle, bold, world-changing, slipped from his mouth like a shield being raised. "She's my wife." The words landed in the small room with the weight of a heartbeat that changes the direction of blood. Selene's breath snagged in her throat. She stared at Cade's back, stunned by the fierceness of his protection. Tully blinked, taken aback. "Your wife." "Since when?" "Since before winter set in," Cade said evenly. "She's tired. She's cold. And we'd appreciate being left alone." Tully hesitated, then exhaled sharply, as though annoyed at the lack of scandal he could claim. "Fine. If you see anything suspicious, you let me know." Cade closed the door before the sentence finished. For a moment, the house felt impossibly quiet. Selene could hear her own heartbeat, fragile and desperate, echoing inside her ribs. Cade turned toward her, and she searched his face for mockery or disappointment, anything that might reveal the lie as a game. A moment of mercy he would take back, but all she found was a soft steadiness. "I won't let them take you," he said. She swallowed hard. "Why would you risk this for me?" Cade's gaze held something ancient and gentle. "Because everyone deserves a place where the world ain't chasing them." The fire popped, sending sparks drifting upward like tiny, hopeful stars. Solon slowly pulled the blanket tighter around herself. For the first time in months, her breath felt like something that belonged to her. Outside, the storm continued its long, sorrowful song. But inside that quiet house, the air shifted just slightly toward something warmer. Not safety, not yet. But the beginning of it, and as the night deepened, she realized she wasn't afraid of tomorrow in the same way anymore. Cade Mercer's lie had become a fragile promise. A shelter, a pause in her running, and pauses, if tended carefully, could become something more. The dawn crept quietly over the snow-blanketed ranch, pale light filtering through frost-laced windows like whispered promises. Inside, Solon stirred beneath the woolen blanket Cade had wrapped around her the night before. Her fingers traced the coarse threads, seeking comfort in their simplicity. The room smelled of wood smoke and quiet endurance. Outside, the cold was relentless, but here, the warmth was a fragile sanctuary, not just from winter's bite, but from the relentless hunt that shadowed her steps. Cade sat by the hearth, eyes tracing the flickering flames with a calm born of years spent wrestling both land and loneliness. He didn't speak at first, letting the silence stretch between them like a breath held too long. Solon watched him the way his broad shoulders eased under the weight of unseen burdens. How the silence around him was a language she was beginning to understand. It wasn't emptiness. It was a careful stillness, a slow rhythm she was learning to move with. Footsteps cracked against the frozen earth beyond the front door. Cade's jaw tightened, the only sign that his senses had shifted from quiet watchfulness to guarded alertness. The sound drew closer, measured and purposeful. Then a knock, sharp, deliberate. Celine's heart contracted in her chest. The weight of the last night's lie, her false title as Cade's wife, loomed heavier now. A shield thin against the blade of suspicion. Cade opened the door to reveal Marshal Brigg Tully, his breath misting in the cold air like smoke from a dying fire. His eyes held the same sharp edge of doubt as before. "Morning, Mercer. I need to speak with you again. Town's talkin' rumors about that girl you're keepin' hidden." Cade's gaze was steady, a wall of winter stone. "She's with me. That's all you need to know." Tully stepped forward, frost crunching under his boots. "I'm not satisfied with that. If you're protecting her, I need proof. This wife's story people don't forget fast around here." Celine's breath caught, but Cade's quiet strength wove a safety net around her trembling. "I'm telling you true," he said. "If you want proof, you'll find it in her own voice." Her voice, when it came, was fragile as the thawing ice. "I'm here because I have nowhere else to go. And because Cade chose to protect me." The admission felt like a small rebellion against the weight of fear that had bound her for so long. Tully's eyes narrowed, then flickered with something like grudging respect. "We'll be watching, Mercer. One wrong move, and this'll end differently." The door shut behind the marshal, and the silence that followed was heavy with unspoken warnings. Cade's gaze met Celine's, and for a moment, space between them was filled with something unspoken but undeniable. A fragile trust born of shared vulnerability. As the day wore on, the storm outside eased into a gentle snowfall, each flake a whispered secret from the sky. Cade moved through his chores with deliberate calm, while Selene found herself drawn to the quiet rhythms of the ranch, the soft rustle of straw, the low murmur of horses, the steady pulse of life beyond the fear. She mended a worn glove of Cade's, her fingers steadying with each careful stitch. Their eyes met briefly, and in that glance, a slow-burning connection flickered, small gestures speaking volumes where words failed. Night fell heavy and cold again, wrapping the world in white silence. The wind carried voices rough, searching down the frozen paths. Then, boots crunched against the snow, deliberate and unyielding. Selene's breath hitched. The time had come. At the barn door, Cade stood unmoving, a giant shadow etched against the swirling snow. The figure approaching was known, a man whose cruelty was as cold as the winter itself. Elias Crowder, ruthless and merciless, moved like a storm upon the land, driven by a claim that no person should hold. Crowder's voice cut through the wind, rough as splintered wood. "Selene, you'll come back with me. This run ends tonight." Cade's reply was measured, unarmed, but unyielding. "She ain't property to be claimed. You'll find no fight here, but I won't step aside either." The tension between them was a taut wire humming beneath the falling snow, thick with danger and quiet resolve. Crowder sneered, but Cade held his ground, a mountain unmoved by the bluster around him. Behind Cade, Selene found her voice, trembling but clear. "He's right. I'm not yours to take." Her words were a declaration, not loud, not defiant in the usual sense, but a steady refusal forged in the cold fires of survival. The marshal appeared then, drawn by the disturbance, eyes sharp and finally, for once, aligned with justice rather than rumor. Crowder's fury spilled over in curses and threats, but the law had shifted. Tully stepped forward, arresting the man whose power had thrived on fear and silence. The storm raged as Crowder was led away, the weight of his presence lifted from Selene's shoulders. In the quiet aftermath, Cade wrapped his coat around Selene's trembling form, a wordless promise that safety was not just a place, but a presence. The fire crackled low, and the cold night outside seemed less vast, less infinite. Morning dawned clear and cold, sunlight scattering over the snow like hope dusted in gold. Selene looked at Cade not as a frightened girl hiding in a barn, but as someone who had been seen, protected, and allowed to breathe. Their hands brushed, a small gesture loaded with everything unspoken up, beginning shaped by patience and quiet grace. This winter, she realized, was not just the season of hardship. It was the season of transformation, of finding warmth in the harshest places, of trust built slowly, like snow melting into the earth, seeping deep enough to nourish new life. And to you, who watches this tale unfold, remember, sometimes the greatest courage is found in silence, the deepest love in small acts, and the strongest shelter in a promise kept without words. In the winters of your own heart, may you find someone who lights a lantern not just to guide you through the dark, but to stay beside you when the storm threatens to consume all. If this story stirred something quiet and real inside you, don't forget to subscribe for more Wild West tales, where every soul's journey is as vast and unpredictable as the open plains.